In the heart of an abandoned cave, Jenna and Daniel uncover an ancient secret. But when the ground cracks open and dark whispers consume their minds, they realize, some things are better left buried. The clock is ticking. Can they escape before it's too late? Jenna, a determined and fearless geologist, Jenna is driven by curiosity and a passion for uncovering the unknown. Her sharp intellect and logical approach often clash with the mysterious forces she faces. As tension builds, her resilience is tested beyond measure. Daniel, a skeptic with a troubled past, Daniel is the more cautious of the pair. Haunted by his own demons, he struggles to trust the unfolding events. As the supernatural forces intensify, Daniel's inner turmoil grows, forcing him to confront his deepest fears to survive. The wind howled across the Black Plateau, carrying flecks of volcanic dust that stung exposed skin like needles. Elliot adjusted his hood and scanned the jagged horizon. Beyond the cracked basalt ridge lay the entrance, barely a slit in the ice, like a wound that never healed. Lena crouched beside their sled, checking the oxygen tanks again. "You're sure this is it?" she asked, her voice muffled through her thermal mask. Elliot nodded, though he wasn't. The coordinates matched the old survey logs. But something about the opening unsettled him. The air that seeped from it was wrong, too warm, too damp. They'd hiked for 2 days to reach this place, far beyond any marked trail. Satellite imagery had revealed the glacial shift only weeks ago, exposing what local legends had long whispered about, a breathing tunnel beneath the highlands, older than the volcanoes themselves. Lena clipped on her headlamp. "We descend 10 meters, then branch east. The scanner's picking up a void system beyond the first choke. If it's real, this could change everything." He remembered saying something similar, years ago. Before the flood. Before the silence. "Let's move," he said. They slid into the crevice, swallowed by the ice. The walls shimmered blue, narrowing with every meter until the light from above disappeared. Only the sound of water dripping and the hiss of their breath remained. As Elliot touched the stone with his gloved hand, a vibration passed through his palm, subtle, like something stirring deep below. The cave exhaled. The passage narrowed to a crawlspace, barely large enough for their gear. Ice clung to the ceiling like teeth. Elliot squeezed through first, boots scraping on frozen stone. Every movement sent echoes spiraling down the tunnel, too loud, too sharp, as if the cave were listening. Lena followed close behind, her breathing steady but fast. "I don't like how warm it is down here," she muttered. "We're surrounded by ice, but it's melting." He didn't answer. The air had grown thick, humid. Drops of water fell steadily from above, tapping against their helmets like a heartbeat. The walls shifted from frostbitten blue to slick black basalt, veins of quartz glinting beneath the beam of Elliot's headlamp. 20 meters down, the tunnel widened into a natural shaft. Ropes were anchored, carabiners clipped. They descended in silence, their light slicing through the steam that hovered near the floor. At the bottom, they stood in a vast chamber. Steam rose from a fissure in the ground, and the sound of slow, wet breathing filled the space. But there was no wind. Lena stepped closer to the fissure, crouching. "It's geothermal," she whispered, shining her light into the crack. "But something's moving. Look." Inside the fissure, something pulsed. Not lava. Not gas. It contracted, then expanded, rhythmically. Elliot stared, frozen. "It's not a vent," he said quietly. "It's a throat." Suddenly, the light behind them flickered. And then, went out. Darkness swallowed them. Lena's breath caught. "My light's dead," she whispered. Her voice was strangled, barely more than a vibration in the air. Elliot clicked his lamp, once, twice, before it sputtered back to life. The narrow cone of light swung wildly, scattering shadows across the jagged walls. He turned toward Lena, her face pale beneath her helmet, the reflection in her eyes wide and trembling. Behind them, the tunnel they'd come through was gone. Not collapsed, just, no longer there. Only solid, glistening rock. That wasn't here before, Lena murmured. Elliot stepped forward, hand grazing the stone. It was wet and warm, like flesh. He pulled away. "We marked the wall," he said, voice low. "No matter what, we keep track." Lena nodded, unzipping a pouch. She scraped an orange chalk X on the wall. The moment she turned away, the chalk hissed and melted, seeping into the rock like blood into cloth. They both saw it. Neither spoke. A low sound rose from the depths. Not wind. Not water. It was too slow. Too deliberate. It was the sound of something vast and old turning in its sleep. They pressed on. Through the haze, they found a narrow corridor sloping downward, its walls glistening with condensation, or sweat. The air was thick with iron, and each step sounded muffled, like they were moving through something that didn't want them there. Lena stopped suddenly. "Do you hear it?" He did. A soft clicking, like fingernails tapping bone. From below. Getting closer. The clicking grew louder. It wasn't constant, it stuttered, paused, resumed, like something feeling its way in the dark. Lena's hand found Elliot's arm. Her grip was tight, nails pressing through his suit. They crouched low, switching off the lamp. Total darkness. The air felt denser now. Like breathing through cloth soaked in ice water. The tunnel curved, opening into a chamber. Something scraped along the stone behind them. Click. 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 Then silence. Elliot dared a whisper. "We move. Now." They slipped forward, blind, relying on memory and instinct. Lena led with one hand on the wall. The clicking didn't return, but neither did their sense of direction. When they flicked the light back on, they found themselves in a dome-shaped cavern, smooth and glistening. Not natural. The walls curved too perfectly, the floor too flat. In the center stood something impossible, a wooden ladder, ancient and half-rotten, descending into a hole that pulsed faintly with blue light. Lena stepped toward it. "Someone built this." Elliot shook his head. "No, something did." Behind them, the clicking resumed. Closer now. Faster. A shadow moved along the cavern's edge, just for a second, but it was enough. Lena gripped the ladder. Down. He hesitated, then nodded. They climbed into the light. The ladder groaned beneath their weight, wood flaking under gloved fingers. The blue glow below grew stronger, not harsh like a spotlight, but pulsing, organic, like a heartbeat. The shaft narrowed, its walls slick with frost. Rime crystals formed intricate patterns that seemed to shift when not directly looked at. Lena looked down once and regretted it, the pit seemed bottomless, the blue glow and ice staring back. Then, without warning, the ladder ended. They dropped the last meter onto packed snow. The air here was warmer, humid even. Their breath no longer steamed. Around them stretched a corridor of ice, smooth and semi-transparent, like they stood inside a glacier that had been hollowed out. Strange markings etched the walls, symbols, curves, and spirals. Some pulsed faintly with that same internal glow. Elliot touched one. "Feels warm." Lena pulled his hand back. "Don't." He stared at her. "You saw it too, didn't you?" The shapes moved. Before she could answer, a low hum started. It came from the walls, vibrating deep in their bones. The ice trembled. Cracks spidered outward, not from impact, but from within. Lena stepped back. "We need to go back." Then the ladder behind them shattered. Something had followed. The collapse sealed the shaft above with a roar of falling ice. Lena spun around, flashlight beam shaking as it cut through the swirling frost. Nothing but silence remained. Elliot muttered, there was something in the walls. The hum was gone, but its aftershock lingered, an oppressive weight pressing against their chests. The glowing symbols dimmed, leaving the corridor darker, colder. The warmth had vanished like a breath held too long. They had no choice but to move forward. As they walked, their boots crunched on the frozen ground. The corridor narrowed, forcing them to go single file. Every so often, Elliot glanced behind them. "Stop that," Lena said. "I keep thinking I hear footsteps that aren't ours." They pressed on. The ice around them was no longer smooth. It bulged and twisted, as if frozen mid-flow. Shapes were trapped within, faces, or at least something face-like. Not human, not animal. Just, watching. Then came a noise. Not loud. Just a faint scrape. They froze. Lena raised her light toward a curve ahead. The beam caught movement, brief, liquid, vanishing before she could focus. She whispered, "We're not alone down here." Elliot's jaw tightened. "We never were." Something was hunting them. Not for hunger. For curiosity. And it already knew their names. The tunnel led into a chamber broader than the rest. Its ceiling arched high above, ribs of ancient ice forming a cathedral of frozen silence. Their lights flickered against the walls, revealing carvings, not etched by tools, but seemingly melted into the ice itself. Lena approached one, breath fogging in front of her. The design was circular, layered, like a spiral drawn by an unsteady hand. Symbols lined its edges, similar to the ones in the shaft but more elaborate, more deliberate. Elliot brushed frost from another section, revealing a line of crude figures, tall, elongated things with arms like tendrils and no discernible faces. Between them stood a human form, head tilted back in agony. "Was this drawn by the expedition?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "No. This is old. Too old." Suddenly, her flashlight dimmed. A soft crack echoed under her feet. She looked down. The ice beneath her boots was clear, too clear. Below her, suspended in the frozen floor, was a body. A man in tattered gear, eyes wide open, mouth agape in a silent scream. Frost had crystallized on his teeth. Elliot cursed and backed away. "That's not one of ours." There were more bodies beneath the ice. All with the same expression of terror. All facing up, as if something below had driven them to madness. Then, from the tunnel behind them, a low sound rose, not a hum. A voice. Calling. Whispering. "Remember us." The voice was like ice, its presence suffocating. Jenna froze, her fingers inches away from the altar. The air grew thick, heavy with an ancient dread that clung to her skin like a second layer. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The shadows in the chamber seemed to shift, as if alive, swirling around the edges of their vision. The walls hummed with a deep, unsettling vibration, a sound that reverberated through their bones. Jenna's pulse quickened, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. She had expected danger, but not this. "Who's there?" Daniel whispered, his voice trembling. The darkness stretched and writhed, forming shapes, humanoid figures that emerged from the shadows with slow, deliberate movements. Their faces were hidden, cloaked in a veil of mist, but Jenna could feel their eyes on her. The presence of the creatures was undeniable, like a weight pressing down on her very soul. She stepped back, her breath shallow. They're not human," Jenna muttered, barely able to get the words out. Daniel took a step closer, his hand trembling as it reached for the knife at his belt. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before they could move, one of the shadowy figures spoke, its voice like a rasping whisper, barely audible. "You awaken what should stay buried." Jenna's stomach twisted. She turned to Daniel, her face pale with fear. "We shouldn't have come." This was a mistake. But it was too late. The shadows seemed to surge forward, coiling around them like a suffocating fog. Jenna gasped, the world spinning as the temperature plummeted, and the stone altar seemed to glow with a faint, eerie light. Something stirred beneath it, something ancient, something alive. The ground trembled again, and a massive crack split the floor beneath their feet. Jenna and Daniel stumbled, caught off guard. The figure at the front of the shadows reached out, its elongated fingers brushing the edge of the altar. "Stop!" Jenna screamed, but her voice was drowned by the deafening rumble that echoed throughout the cave. A cold wind howled through the chamber, and the shadows deepened, consuming everything. In that moment, Jenna understood, they were not just intruders in this place. They were prey. The creatures weren't simply defending something, they were guarding it. The darkness pressed in on all sides, thick and suffocating. Jenna's heart raced, the frantic pulse reverberating in her ears as the shadowy figures closed in. She could feel the oppressive weight of their presence, each step forward making her breath harder to draw, as though the very air was being drained from the cavern. Daniel stood by her, motionless, the blade of his knife glinting faintly in the dim light as he gripped it tightly. "Jenna," Daniel's voice was barely a whisper, strained with panic. "We need to." But before he could finish, the ground trembled again, stronger this time, and a deep, guttural sound filled the chamber, as if something immense and ancient was awakening beneath them. The altar pulsed with a sickly light, flickering like a dying flame, casting twisted shadows that danced grotesquely across the walls. The air was charged, electric, humming with an unnatural energy that set the hairs on the back of Jenna's neck on end. The shadow in front of them stirred, its form blurring and shifting, no longer a mere silhouette but something more tangible. The figure began to materialize, revealing its true shape, a towering being, its features obscured by an almost tangible blackness that seemed to swallow the light. It stood taller than any man, with limbs that were unnaturally elongated, like the twisted roots of an ancient tree. Its presence felt ancient, malevolent, a force beyond human comprehension. Jenna's breath caught in her throat, her instincts screaming at her to run, but her feet remained rooted to the cold stone floor. She could feel its gaze, if it even had eyes, piercing through her, drawing her in like a moth to a flame. The figure's mouth opened, but the sound that came from it wasn't a voice, it was a series of dissonant, unnatural noises, a cacophony of whispers that echoed inside her mind. "You have disturbed the balance," the whispers hissed. "The end is near." Jenna shook her head, her mind reeling. "No," she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. We didn't mean to." The figure's shape shifted again, swirling with darkness, until it seemed to take on a more human form, towering yet eerily elegant. It reached down, its long fingers curling toward the altar. A violent, shrill sound filled the air, like metal scraping against stone, and the altar began to split open. The ground beneath their feet quaked, as though the entire cavern was alive and in agony. From within the altar, something began to rise, a form, dark and shifting, twisting in the air like a serpent coiling itself upward. A cold wave of dread flooded over Jenna, choking her, drowning her in the abyss of fear. Her body trembled, and she stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to run. The shadows pressed in tighter, the air growing colder with every passing second. "We have to stop it," Daniel shouted, his voice strained. He raised the knife, but his hands were shaking, his resolve crumbling in the face of the horror unfolding before them. Jenna's mind was racing, her thoughts colliding in chaos. Stop it. But how? They were far too late. The ancient evil they had unearthed was awake, and it would not rest until everything in its path had been consumed. The darkness rose higher, and Jenna could feel it, the weight of impending doom, the certainty that nothing would be the same again. She closed her eyes, praying for some way out, but there was no salvation. The creature's whispers surrounded her, and with every passing second, the walls of the cavern seemed to close in tighter. She felt Daniel's grip on her arm tighten, pulling her closer. "Jenna, we don't have much time." But Jenna knew, in the deepest pit of her soul, that time had already run out. The end was here. In the final chapter, Jenna and Daniel find themselves trapped in a cavern where an ancient, dark force has awakened. The ground trembles as the altar splits open, releasing a vortex of black mist. The whispers from the creature grow louder, filling their minds with maddening voices, urging them to surrender. Despite their fear and desperation, they try to fight back, but they are overwhelmed by the creature's power. The shadows close in around them, and they feel the suffocating weight of the darkness. As the last light from the altar flickers out, they are thrown into complete darkness. A sudden flash of light forces the darkness to recede, leaving behind a ruined altar and an oppressive silence. The creature is gone, but the terror lingers. Jenna and Daniel are left scarred, knowing they've survived, but the horrors they faced will haunt them forever. The nightmare may have ended for now, but its echoes will remain.